There's a stranger staring at me in my rear view. Damned if he don't look a lot like me. Yeah, running tired and reckless ain't no way to run at all. There ain't nothing like the thrill from a running free. Well, it's a good thing I left my heart in Texas.
Hello and welcome to those of you that are tuning in today. My name is Jack Hatley, and this is the 10-Man Jack podcast. 10 years ago, I survived a widowmaker heart attack the day after I turned 37 years old. It threw my entire world off its axis, and for quite a while, I struggled with anxiety and basically thoughts that my life would never go back to normal. And here I am, 10 years later. I'm happier than I ever thought that I'd be back then. And essentially, I've created this podcast in the hopes of sharing my story and the stories of other people who've gone through all ilk of traumatic and or life-altering events and eventually went on to reclaim their life and find a new sense of purpose. Everyone that you'll hear from on the show, including myself, has gone through something that felt defeating, but we were lucky enough and determined enough to get back on track. And I count my blessings every day as a result. My guest today is someone that I've known for a long time, dating back to when I lived in Victoria, Texas. I'd like to welcome my buddy Shane Patterson. He has an amazing story, and I hope you enjoy it. And I know that it's going to help someone out there. All right, Shane, thanks again for coming on with me today. Why don't we just dive right in, and you can tell us about the day that your life changed.
All right. Well, it was a Saturday. Actually, it was December the 1st, 2018. Me and my buddies went to the motocross track and just to ride, not a race, just to practice. And like we always did, we've been doing it for years. I've been riding dirt bikes all my life. And we got to the track, unloaded their stuff, got ready. Went out and did about 5 or 6 laps and got warmed up and stopped to take a break. And we rested for a little while and talked and went back out there for our second session. And I made a full lap around the track. On the right-hand turn, went over a little jump, and that's where my memory stops right there. And I woke up laying in a hospital bed with my wife sitting next to me, and I looked around at the ceiling and all the lights, and I was like, what the heck are we doing in a hospital? And she said, well, they almost cut your leg off and you almost died. And she said, on your dirt bike. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's the end of my dirt bike career. So I was unconscious for 8 days. I didn't realize it obviously at the time. Last time I was awake, I was at the track, so I didn't know anything happened. And however I crashed, I don't have any recollection. What I've been told was I went over a jump, crashed over the jump and wrecked tremendously and ended up on the face of the following jump. And a guy came over the jump that I crashed on and hit me on the side of the head with his front forks on his dirt bike. And so I ended up having 2 brain bleeds, and I shattered my tibia right below my knee in 26 pieces. And when it broke, it severed my arteries. And of course, they didn't know any of this because nothing looked like it was wrong with my leg. They were just worried about my head injury. So when the bone broke, it severed all the arteries that go down below your knee. And so I got compartment syndrome. So the blood was pumping down into my leg. My calf was swelling up, but the blood couldn't get back out because the arteries were cut. So according to my ex-wife, she said that they were worried about my head. They had to cut my leg open to let the blood out. They had hooked up a machine to it to suck all the blood and stuff out of my leg.
I saw one of the pictures that
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. And they had to fix my arteries first before they even messed with the bone. And once they got the arteries fixed and were happy with that, the blood flow was working properly, they went in and put all the bone back together. So I got 13 screws and 2 bars in my leg now, holding it all together. And the bad news about that is the doctor told me whenever I had to have a knee replacement, which I will have to have a knee replacement, that they're going to have to take all that hardware out of my leg to do a knee replacement. So I got that to look forward to at some point in my life.
And I'm gonna have to call you Tin Man.
I'll take it. I mean, it's crazy. I I was in the hospital for 21 days, and the first, I'm going to say, really the first couple of months that I was out of the hospital, my head wasn't right. Obviously, I was banged up, but the whole time I was just thinking, man, how come I didn't get killed in this wreck? Because according to the doctors and everybody else, they're like, man, you're lucky you didn't die, and you're lucky that they saved your leg, obviously. Of course, my leg's like a kickstand now. I can't really feel it below the knee very much, and I can't move my foot at all. It's like a drop foot. I don't have any nerve feelings in my foot. So I spent 3 months sitting in my house after I got out of the hospital. Couldn't put any weight on my leg. Had to use a walker and a wheelchair to get around. And I don't know if you remember the scene in Star Wars where they fell in the trash dumpster in the very beginning and the walls were closing in. That's what this living room behind me felt like. It was just 3 months of sitting there watching TV and trying to do Sudoku puzzles and games to get my head back working right.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you if there were many times that you were by yourself, because I know when I was in the hospital and in ICU, they wouldn't let anybody stay in there with me after a certain time, and I didn't
Oh,
sleep for a minute the entire time I was in there, and you know, all I could think of was just negative thoughts and like, what? How did this happen? So I can only imagine with. I was only in the hospital for a few days, but for as long as you were, I'm sure there were a lot of moments that really got to you. What was that like?
well, when I was in the hospital, like I said, my head was so foggy. I have to say this right off the bat, and I knock on wood and thank the Lord that I have never had any serious physical pain from that wreck at all.
That's hard to imagine.
I know it is, and it's crazy to me too that like my knee kind of aches a little bit every once in a while, and that's the extent of the pain I've had to deal with. Of course, physical therapy hurt, but that's a different story. But
What was the pain like when you initially woke up?
non-existent. Like my leg was so shot from them cutting it up and the nerves being messed up, I couldn't feel anything in my leg. And I had rods running through my bones and all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's a miracle. No memory and no pain.
That's man, that's a blessing, I guess. And
It definitely is.
what was the medical personnel like that was on the track at the time? Like who got to you first?
I, I think my friend Mark Zimmer was there at the track with me, and I think he got around and was trying to help me. They said I was trying to crawl off the track. I don't have any recollection of that, but he helped me, and they had to call an ambulance to come take care of me. And the track's only about 30 or 45 minutes from Austin. So they took me to the hospital in an ambulance. And when I woke up and got my faculties about me, I asked my wife, I said, did they life flight me to the hospital? Because I had the PHI insurance just in case, because I've seen it come to that track too many times. And I was like, I'm going to get insurance for the helicopter just in case I ever had to ride on it. She said, no, they just brought you the ambulance. I was like, God dang, what a waste. But uh, and I have to say a shout out to St. David's South Hospital in Austin because their trauma unit was unbelievable. The people that were taking care of me, I couldn't have asked for better care, man. It was awesome.
Well, that's great to hear, man. I'm glad that that was available and nearby.
Yes.
As far as like your mental or emotional recovery from this whole process, I remember back to mine, and mine wasn't great initially, and I certainly didn't start off handling it the right way. Um, I've joked about this before to many people that initially I had a lot of appointments with a therapist who had a nice little office inside of a 12-ounce can.
Yeah. I've been to that one too.
Yeah, it was made a lot of visits there, but I realized eventually that that tactic wasn't getting me too far in the direction that I needed to go, and so fortunately, some reason and logic prevailed, and so I started. I think exercise helped me a lot, and my wife, Amy, and I, she agreed to start training for a half marathon with me, and so we did. We trained for that. We ran it. We finished it, and I think that that whole process bolstered my confidence a lot, and got me to a point to where I trusted my heart again, basically.
Right. That's a
Prior
big
to that,
step.
yeah, I just didn't trust my body to do what it was supposed to do after it had failed me in a big way. And so for me, that whole process really did kind of set me back on track, and it just gave me the confidence to kind of move forward and leave some of the negative tactics that I'd used behind. Granted, I didn't leave them completely behind, but not
Right.
so much as a coping mechanism anymore. So, how did that go for
Yes.
you? Did you find something that really helped you emotionally and physically?
Well, I did actually, because, I did drink pretty good before my crash. And when I was in the hospital, I was dipping snuff at the time also, which I've done all my life. I left the hospital and I said, man, it's been 21 days and I haven't had a dip of snuff. And that was it. I quit. I never did it again. I haven't done it since then. And I, I didn't start drinking right away because I couldn't handle it. And I'd try to drink a beer and I'd be like, ugh. So I didn't do that for a while. And in 2019, I'd say probably in March, when I was recovered enough, I started drinking again, but only on the weekends, not like crawl in a can and stay in there. And by Christmas of 2019, I'd had enough for drinking. It was like wasn't helping me at all, wasn't doing anything. I was just tired of it. It didn't even taste good anymore. And so after New Year's, February of 2020, I quit drinking totally. And I went for 9 months without a drop of alcohol.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine that
we went,
probably helped your process quite a bit.
it, it did. I mean, I needed all the help I can get with my head injury. But after 9 months, we went to a birthday party at an Italian restaurant. And I told my wife, I said, I haven't drank long enough to have a baby. So I'm going to have 2 glasses of red wine tonight just to see, because I knew my personality. If if I drank 2 glasses of red wine before, that turned into a six pack and a couple of Crown of Waters, it's nonstop.
Right.
So I drank those 2 glasses. I drank the 2 glasses of red wine, and that was all I needed. I didn't hardly even got a buzz. I was like, man, I'm good. And I didn't drink again for another 6 months. So I knew that I was free from the binds of alcohol. And the good thing is, I can drink every once in a while, and it's months at a time. And it's amazing to be able to do that compared to the way I grew up.
Yeah, I know. I kind of followed in your footsteps on that. We're from the same place. I know how that goes. Yeah, and for me, it was something that I realized I can still do that, but it's not something that helped at all with trying to get back to a spot where I wanted to be in life. And so there were many other things that I found that were able to help me do that. And so I still like to have a few beers, but it's not like I'm doing that to go to sleep. So that's
Well, the one thing that I really started doing that's helped me mentally and physically, obviously, is going back to the gym, which I started in January of 2020, and I've been going to the gym 4 days a week from 2020 to now. Like I just went this morning, so that's really helped me a lot. That keeps my mind straight and keeps me feeling good, and it helps out tremendously.
Is there anybody you'd say was kind of the impetus behind you picking that up, or was it just something that you gravitated to on your own?
It's just something I gravitated to because I used to go before the wreck happened, and of course, obviously, I couldn't do anything when I was beat up and banged up. But once I got well enough, I started back, and it's been a progression, man. I'm telling you, I started off being pretty limited on what I could do, obviously, and like now I can do a full legitimate squat, which that makes me so happy because before I couldn't do it at all, and I've only got one and a half legs, so balancing has always been an issue. So to be able to do a full blown squat is like a major accomplishment for me, and it makes me very happy.
Was there ever a point where you thought, maybe you wouldn't get your life back to the way it was or to a spot you wanted to be?
No, I think my attitude is too positive. I never had a dark outlook on any of it. I was just like always looking ahead to the next goal. I was like, this isn't gonna slow me down. It's not gonna stop me. It's not gonna hurt me.
Yeah, I do realize how if you kind of make a decision to channel your energy into a positive direction, you can definitely rewrite the whole script. And I think there's a line from The Big Lebowski, and ultimately, I think it was Theodore Herzl said, "If you will it, it is no dream." So that's if you
Right.
set your mind to something, there you go. So,
Yes, sir.
but
For sure.
with me, little things that used to worry me, they don't anymore. I have a way different outlook on life, and the things that can get my blood pressure up are much more serious than, say 10, 11 years ago. And I just simply don't care about people or things that aren't going to make my life more enjoyable or better. So,
Exactly.
do you feel like there are people or things that became more or less important in your life as a result of your accident?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say I didn't make people less important to me because of it, but it started off with little things like riding in the car with my ex-wife because I couldn't drive, obviously, and I used to do it too. Somebody pull out in front of you, oh, why did you do that? Get all mad about it, and I was at the time like, that's no big deal. Don't worry about it. Just let it go. And it's funny how my attitude has gone from that back to getting mad when people pull out in front of me at traffic. But I keep telling myself it doesn't matter. I have to remind myself, you weren't worried about it before, don't worry about it now. And little things like that, I've definitely looked the other way on tons of stuff that I used to would have got pissed off about. And it's like, doesn't even matter.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
matter at
can
all.
I can definitely relate to that. I'm not the
Yeah.
kind of person just baseline that really gets upset about much, but now I really don't. It's pretty hard to rattle me these days.
Yeah.
So my kids have figured out a way to do that, but those two
They know which
individuals
buttons to push.
aside, I'll give them a pass.
All right.
But so you shared a lot of pictures with me from the period of time when you were in the hospital.
Yep.
Now, when you look, what goes through your mind when you look at those pictures today?
Well, the main thing, I think about all the people that were there that had to see me like that. I was like, oh my God, no wonder everybody thought I was going to die. I looked terrible, but in retrospect, to me, I don't remember any of it. It was like I was dreaming. I did have some really interesting dreams at that time too when I was unconscious. But I felt more sorry for the people that were in the hospital room with me, looking at me the way I looked, than I felt myself.
And that's a pretty interesting, and I'd say humble perspective. Are there any doctors or nurses that you specifically remember or still keep in touch with?
I definitely remember one nurse that was there, and she doesn't work there anymore, unfortunately, because the following year I took smoked pork tenderloins and some homemade jalapeno jelly to all the people that took care of me in the trauma unit, about a dozen people. And I was so upset that she wasn't there anymore. They said she went to work at a different hospital. But I remember her, she was like an angel. When I woke up, she was right there and she took care of me. I remember very well.
Yeah, I had someone like that myself. I was in the emergency room, actively kind of in the middle of having this heart attack, and there were, I don't know how many people in there. I was awake the whole time, but not one of them did I know. Um, Everybody had a job to do, I guess, and thankfully they were doing their jobs, still here. But so that being said, they really didn't have time to chit chat, make me feel better. But there was
Right.
a doctor that walked through. I don't know what he was doing, but he wasn't part of the team caring for me. But he just walked right up to the hospital bed, and he's like, "How are you doing?" It's like, I was like, "Am I going to die?" And he looked right at me. He was like, "You probably are," but he was like, "I don't think you're going to today." And I remember looking at his jacket, and I saw his name, and for some reason, a few days later, when I got out of the hospital, I remembered his name. I kind of got his contact information. I wrote him a letter, and I was just like thanking him for actually taking the time to just add some human element to that whole experience, because beyond that, I was just scared to death. So that's one person that I will always remember, along with my now cardiologist and the nurses who were in the cardiac rehab. So that does go a
Yeah,
long way when you have people that help you through something like that. But
absolutely.
so, what would you say? And this is a very general question, but what is the biggest difference between the guy who sat on that bike that day um, and the guy who's sitting here talking to me today?
Oh man. Well, I would say I'm 90% different than the guy I was the day I got on a dirt bike, at least. Um, my whole perspective on the entire world is different. And, I thought about it before. I'm like, I wonder if this is because of the wreck or old age or combination, growing up finally, 50 years old, growing up, which I'm still not grown up, obviously, but I'm getting there. So I think that the matters of the world are a much larger concern to me now than they ever were before, because it's not actually going in the right direction right now, obviously. Too much turmoil, and I mean, I don't know what it's going to take to get that straightened out, but I'm very concerned about that. And before, I couldn't give two flips about it. It's like, whatever. So that's definitely something that's changed with me. And I'll tell you what else is interesting, Jack. My wife at the time when I had my dirt bike wreck, I have to thank her 110% for taking care of me and loving me the way she did. But when I quit drinking, I guess that kind of broke the mirror that she was used to looking at because she drank a lot too. And it took 9 weeks from when I quit drinking to she said I changed too much and she wanted to get divorced. So I was like, well, okay. And the funny thing is, my original ex-wife that I had kids with, she got divorced the year before I did, and we started talking after I got my divorce, and she said she wanted to get back together with me because I changed. So that was I was like, man, wow, okay. So we've been back together for over 2 years now, and every day is like the first day. It's like I wanted it to be the first time, but we were so young, and I was obviously not too smart at the time. And I mean, that's like I'm living in a dream now, to be honest with you.
Well, I know both of the women that you referenced, one better than the other, but I would say
Right.
you're lucky guy to have or have
Yeah,
had both of them in your life. So I'm glad,
exactly.
you know, that whole situation has worked out the way it has for you.
Yes, it's been pretty miraculous. I'm gonna say my life's been pretty miraculous in the last 5 years, actually.
What is it that keeps your drive up every day to go to the gym and
Well, I've always had a positive outlook on life. Even when something other people consider bad happens, I'm just like, you get over it, carry on, get past it. It's not a big deal. It's just, I never let things bother me. And I'm fortunate to have that attitude. And I think I got that from my dad. Like I shouldn't say that. That's from both sides because my mom's father was very, very patient and understanding. And the house could be on fire and everybody be running around with their heads cut off, and he'd be like walking outside to get the water hose, just cool as a cucumber always. So I think that's been a big help for me, and I attribute a bunch of the to them. And my motivation to go to the gym every day comes from the heart. I don't know. I couldn't imagine not going. I get upset if I can't make it.
what advice would you give to someone who's going through something? It doesn't have to be a motorcycle accident, just anything that's derailed someone. What advice, based on your experience, do you think would be valuable in helping someone out that's on that road right now?
Well, obviously, your mindset has got to be good, and I know that's not easy. That's certainly not easy for a lot of people, but you have to get your mind and your heart together.
I agree.
You know, it's not all just in your head. Your heart's got just as much to do with your life as your brain does, and you got to get them working together and get on the right path. And I was just talking about that the other day with a lady at work. Their friend that works there also. He's in his later 60s. Well, he had a heart scare, and you know, I'm at the point where I'm not going to rag on anybody or give them a hard time for being unhealthy and making unhealthy choices. But you don't think about it until you have the heart attack. Like, oh God, I need to do something different. Well, luckily you're young enough. You can do something different, and make a difference. But when you're 70 years old and it happens, well, what are you going to do then? It's kind of a late in life to try to do something different, and you're too set in your ways to make any changes. Then,
Yeah, that's. I think the advice that I would lend someone, just based on my experience, is and it sort of mirrors what you said. You have to have the mindset that you want to get better, and you have to identify the place that you want to be. It's not going to happen on its own. It's not going to be fun, but I've said this before, but the effort definitely has to match the aspiration. And if it doesn't, you're probably going to find yourself making no progress. And so I think it's just very important that you sort of take ownership of the situation. And I mean, ultimately, nobody's going to do it but you. So that would be.
That's right. Nobody's going to save you but yourself.
Right, exactly. And that's not what a lot of people want to hear, but it's the reality of it. So
that's exactly right. And I've got to tell you another thing. If you can get your mind set to it, you can do anything you want to do. I mean, I know people say that all the time, but that's the truth. You can change your life with your thoughts.
yeah, and there are a lot of things that you can do. You can have ideas of things that, but you can also act on those ideas. And so
that's right.
If somebody else can do it, so can you. So that's
right.
But I don't know. I'm not sure if you share the same sentiment here, but I've kind of likened my experience to standing on a bridge. On one side of that bridge is the day that I had that heart attack. And on the other end is the day that I'm going to die. And I've come to terms with both. And these days, I don't freak out about thinking what's on this end, what's on this end. To me, I just focus on right now, and today matters more than anything else.
That's all there is, Jack. I don't mean to interrupt you, but right now is all there is.
Yep, I agree.
The past, the future hadn't happened yet. It's right now is it.
Yeah, that's. I used to have just anxiety attacks thinking about what is replaying in my mind what happened, or thinking about when it's all going to come crashing down. And it's such a waste of time. And it's much easier said than done when you really embrace those two things and realize one's in the past, one's in the future. You can't go back. You can't accelerate forward. You're just right here. So, but yeah, man, I really, really appreciate you sharing your story with me today. And it was great to hear from you again. And I'm just so glad that I'm sorry you went through that, but I'm so glad that you're in the spot you are today and that you're doing well. And, and you're in a good place emotionally, physically. And before I let you go, however, I know you mentioned your dad earlier.
Yes.
There are a litany of very colorful stories that involve your dad.
Oh, yeah.
I wish that you would pick maybe one and just share that with us.
Hey, let me think of which one would be appropriate for this. I think I'll share the one when he wanted to ride my dirt bike, since the dirt bike crash is what we're talking about. So I was 15 years old at our bay house in Port O'Connor, Texas. We had a big bunk room downstairs that would sleep about 15 or 20 people in it. And me and all my buddies were down there sleeping. It was like 3 in the morning, and we heard this crash. And you could feel it almost. You could feel it in the concrete. And we all jumped up and like, what was that? I don't know. And we just kind of waited to hear something else and never heard anything. So we all just kind of went back to sleep. Well, I had my dirt bike down there, and it was sitting on the center stand. And we got up the next morning to go upstairs and eat breakfast. And I walked by my dirt bike and I noticed that the brake lever was broke. And I was like, oh my gosh, she must have knocked it down off the stand last night. So we got upstairs, and my dad was up there. Of course, he'd been drinking. And he walked out, and I said, Dad, did you knock my dirt bike off of the stand last night? No, no, no. And I said, that's funny. The brake levers broke off of it. I said, you sure you didn't knock it off? He said, hell yeah, I knocked it off. I want to ride that thing. I tell you what, it was a 1986 YZ-125, and it had a Kickstarter about that long on it, and you had to choke it just right and give it the throttle just right to get it running. So I said, "Well, if you wanna ride it, you gotta get it started. If you can get it started, you can ride it." So after we finished breakfast, we ended up downstairs with the dirt bike out in the driveway, and we lived at the end of a road that had a row of houses down it that were on the water. So he has on this little leather Hirachi shoes with the slick soles on them. He gets on that dirt bike and he kicks it, shoe slides off, kicks it again. The foot pedal gouged his shin up, like bleeding, tore it up. I was like, oh my gosh. He kept kicking it. He finally got it started, and I was like, oh boy, oh man, here we go. He get, pulled the clutch in, put it in gear, dumped the clutch, killed it. I was like, whew, that was close. And so then he really got mad and he told me, get this thing running. I'm going to ride it. So got it started. He took off down the street. Now we're watching him from the back go down the street and he's swerving back and forth. His first gear just, so we're like, okay, maybe this isn't too bad. Well, he got about 6 houses down the street and went to turn around to come back. And the people's driveway he turned around in was pea gravel, like solid pea gravel. And he turned in that pea gravel and it's kind of slid a little bit. And then he whiskey throttled it and went wide open across the street right into a parked boat trailer with no boat on it, thankfully. But when that motorcycle hit that trailer, his legs went out underneath the handlebars and then he flipped over the handlebars and landed on the trailer like a dead man, diagram. And my bike was laying on its side, bam, 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 still running. And we're like, oh my God, me and my friend ran down there. And my dad was kind of crawling up off the trailer. And I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? He said, man, that thing's got a lot of power. I said, no shit. I told you. So I picked my bike up, rode it back to the house. Him and my friend walked back down there. And, I was mad. I was 15 years old. I was mad at the time. I was glad he wasn't hurt. But later on that afternoon, he was sitting on the couch and he had some little short cut off pants that he made into shorts. And he was sliding down on the couch and the shorts were riding up on his legs and the inside of his thighs were black and blue. Man, I mean, bruised up to no end. And I just walked by him and looked at him and shook my head like, oh my God. And he never complained, never said a word about being hurt, but he was definitely a character, Jack.
Yes, he was. I wish I could have been on hand for that one.
There were several of them. I mean, you could do a whole another podcast on just BP stories.
I think you're right. You might be onto something here. All right, Shane, it's been great talking to you, man. I really appreciate you sharing your story and doing this. I think that it really can, providing examples like this can really go a long way to help somebody that's maybe where you were, where I was years ago, and in a place where they're just wondering how they're going to get through tomorrow. But
right. You hear about people having heart attacks and people having dirt bike crashes. You're like, oh man, that sucks. But until it happens to you, you just don't have any idea what it's really like.
Yep, I agree with you, man. And that's why I think it's so important to share these kind of stories. So
absolutely.
Hopefully this is going to help somebody.
If it helps one person, I'm happy.
All right, man. It was good to talk to you.
You too, Jack. My pleasure, man. I'm glad you're doing this.
Well, thank you. As I said, I'm not polished on this. This is a project that I've undertaken that I don't really, probably not qualified to do, but it's been fun so far. So we're going to see how much mileage we can get out of it.
Good deal.
There's a stranger staring at me in my rear view. Damned if he don't look a lot like me. Yeah, running, tired and reckless, ain't no way to run at all. There ain't nothing like a thrill from a running free. good thing. Left my heart in Texas